Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm so excited to have you on. This was a manifestation in its own right, just that I connected with you at the TBM event and you happened to be free in that moment and I came over and started chatting and you're very just kind of open. Don't have any fear. If there's a podcast guest you want to invite on, just ask them. Don't be afraid. And I was like,
Yeah.
well, actually, it's you. And here we are.
Oh my gosh, it was so perfect. It's so funny because I don't do that many podcasts, so I'm so weird on the other end. I feel like my quirky, what do I say? I'm so unfamiliar with this seat on the podcast. So thank you for for having me and giving me the space.
Absolutely. You were definitely a big expander for me in starting this podcast. I would go back and listen to the expanded podcast where you are the host and listen to how you conduct the interviews, how you allow and give that supportive space, but then you also take up space. You're not
Mm.
afraid to share your own thoughts, condense everything that's been said into like this really beautiful, streamlined sentence that's very digestible for the listeners.
Mm.
And so thank you for showing me that it's possible to do that.
I really appreciate that. It's been quite a journey of sitting into that role and really feeling comfortable, in my own skin and in my own voice in that role. Um, and I feel like it's like, oh, okay, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Like I finally have fit the groove that feels right. But it's interesting. I think, especially when it comes to podcasting, because I get a lot of questions about people starting their own podcast and wanting to do that. The best advice I have is just to go for it and you will learn along the way. Like you'll find your voice, you'll find what works for you, you'll find your audience, you'll find, the topics that light you up. And you can't really know any of those things unless you're doing. So it's just one of those things you have to, if you're getting that call, that ping to have those conversations, just start doing and the rest will work itself out.
Absolutely. I've been feeling that in different areas as well. I am a manifesting generator in my human design. So I have a lot of different interests and I've had a lot of different businesses throughout my life. Sometimes I'll get an idea like last year I was like, I'm going to start a baby food delivery company. Like there's Sakara
Wow.
Life and Goop Kitchen, but like why are there no fresh baby food delivery services? And I bought all these books and started making it at while I was working and cooking and then I burnt out really fast. And I was like, I
Mm,
don't want to do this. This isn't for me. But I only knew that because I started doing it. Whereas with the
mm,
podcast, I had that same initial fire of, ooh, I'm going to start a podcast. And then having to learn how to use GarageBand editing and how to upload onto a podcast hosting site and just connect on Zoom with guests like you. And I love it. So I've kept
mm.
going. So you have to do it. You have to take that step, and that will help you decide if that's the right path for you.
Absolutely. And your manifesting generator. And then what's your astrology?
My sun is Gemini,
Hmm.
my moon and my rising are Pisces.
I was like, there's got to be a Sag in there somewhere.
Close.
But I guess the water too, like being fluid and being open to like all the next pieces and next steps. So that makes so much sense.
Yes. And there's so much duality. Just Gemini is the twins, and then Pisces are the two fish, the yin
Mm,
and yang. And so I kind of visualize it as like each twin in the Gemini gets their own set of fish.
mm, I
It's
love
cute,
that.
but yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
So I'd love to hear how I know just from listening to you on the expanded podcast, but maybe even like more in detail where you started not podcasting and how that path to becoming, in my eyes, this like famous podcast host of the TBM expanded podcast. Um,
So flattered. Thank you.
yeah, yes. Well, I mean, you took a lot of different steps and you really anchored into your authenticity and followed your intuition. And that's what I'm all about is are those two pieces, authenticity and intuition, will lead to that manifestation, but then it's just a continuing cycle. So
Mm.
through your process, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I get this question a lot around like career journey, how I got to this role and all of that stuff. And it's kind of non-traditional, but like isn't everyone's, you know? So I went to film school at Penn State and I've always loved television film. I love telling stories. I love like the visuals of it. I was just so enthralled with like, you know, my favorite thing during high school was like laying in bed and like watching movies till like 3 a.m. on HBO and being like, wow, that was so powerful and moving. Like I feel like a different person for having watched it and witnessed it and like learned about the world in a different way. And so I think like a big core authentic piece of me was I love the ability to share a story with individuals and have them walk away from that story and be like, wow, I feel differently about my own human experience. And so that I was like, great, television and film, like that's the avenue that I want to go in. And I started off working in New York. I worked for a production company, you know, more traditional route of like intern to executive assistant, worked in their casting department. Then I wound up running their casting department, and then was producing in-house. So at this particular company, they were a mix of mostly unscripted work and live format work, and then some scripted here and there, but mostly unscripted, which wasn't really my passion, but it was like a foot into the industry. And I was able to produce, and producing on some of those roles was a lot more similar to directing, in terms of creating the creative for the show. And so that felt really fulfilling. I was so excited by that. And even finding like, okay, even unscripted, you are telling a story. It is very thought out and pre-created, even if you're doing a build show or a lifestyle show, you know, there's a lot of story content that goes into it and storytelling. But eventually I was like, okay, really, to tell the type of stories I want to tell, it needs to be scripted, because the reality TV version and unscripted wasn't quite going there, and they weren't quite in the documentary space. So there wasn't that angle to it. And a lot of the scripted productions are out in LA. So I'd always wanted to be in LA. I think I dressed up as like a Miss California pageant queen for Halloween one year. Like I always dreamed of California. I just thought like, I hate the winters on the East Coast. I want warmth. Summer is my favorite season. Let's do it. And the opportunity presented and I left. And I am someone who really clings to security and foundation. Maybe it's a Capricorn, it's definitely programming and limiting beliefs that I've had to work through. But I really kind of started to move from a job that I had a stable income, stable paycheck, benefits, all of those things, to freelance world, which was a huge cliff to jump off of. You know, working for a company where arguably I'm making more per week or per month, but once the show's over, the show's over. Like everyone's technically fired, and then you're on to the next project, and then you move on to the next show or whatever it is. So I had to kind of get comfortable with this on again, off again, freelance lifestyle. And I actually liked it way more than I thought, although like the job security wasn't quite there. I found myself able to easily book things. And the time between was so nice, because when you're on sets and producing for things, it's like you're there all day. Like it's like a 12, 14-hour day, especially when you're shooting. It's all hands on deck. You get home and you are exhausted and you just kind of crash. And then, you know, it's the excitement of the next day. And that was really fun, but I felt so burnt out at the end of it. Like my body was exhausted. I needed so much rest. And so I loved the phases in between jobs where I had like complete downtime and I could go into myself. And that's when I started really diving into spirituality, wellness, and health and well-being. I've always been interested in it, but that took like a whole new journey. I was also like freshly out of a breakup and in like the rock bottom phases of heartbreak and moving through that and trying to find meaning of going forward and all that fun stuff. And I started to see all these sort of, different wellness companies pop up. And I would see whether it was like a workshop or a book, or maybe they were just a brand. And it started to expand me to see, they're doing media production, like they're creating content. Like that is a visual creative thing. Those are tools that I have, skill sets that I have. And they're talking about stories and teachings and things that like I love, that light me up, that I'm excited about, that I think are, checks that box of, you hear this story and it changes your perspective on the world. So I started to kind of be really attracted to that space. And in the downtime of production jobs, I wound up launching my own podcast. I kept getting the ping. I was like, what does this ping have to do with my next career move? Like, I don't understand. It doesn't connect. Like, how am I, it's going to take so long to monetize off of this. Like, I need a next job move where I'm going to make money. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But I kept getting it. I would journal and write and try to listen to my intuition. And I was like, what is one next action step I can take to move forward? Like doing the 2B magnetic process stuff. Like, what is that one next action step? And I was like, unblocking limiting beliefs and finding expanders and all of the things. And every time it was like, launch your own podcast. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense, but okay, let's go. And I have a lot of friends who are in wellness, or they're musicians, or they just have really cool life stories. I was like, let me just start having conversations with them and see where we end up. And I learned so much from launching it. Besides, I always had the skill set of editing because I would edit at the production company. I would sit in on post-production editing. So I was really familiar. And it was a little bit easier editing because you didn't have the visual to have to match the audio. And create a soundscape and all of those things. So that felt really good. The difficult part was feeling comfortable behind the mic. And then all the tech stuff behind it, like you said, you have to find the distributor and make sure it gets uploaded. And then it's like, create graphics to share. How are people going to find out about it? And how do you tag this person? And should you share a quote or should you share an image? And you need a show notes page with like links and where people can find everything and tidbits and takeaway. And I mean, I went like above and beyond. My listenership after like the first episode was relatively small. And I'm like, I should create a shop with all the favorite things that people talk about in the episodes. And I'm like, no one needed the shop, but I learned how to do it. So that was really helpful. And then a few friends had asked me to help edit and produce on some of their content and some of their podcast stuff. So I started to gain this skill set on the side while still calling in either a more aligned job in film and television that was able to tell that story, or something in the wellness space. And I felt really conflicted because I was teetering between the two so much. And I was like, which one is it? And I just kept getting like, just surrender, like something will align, something will come through. And it's funny because I was in love with TBM, wanted to work for them so badly, but you can't manifest specifics. Like they always say, like you can manifest something like this, like the feeling of TBM, but not that exact company. But I was like, no, it's this exact company. And I had to kind of like check myself and be like, okay, no, it's this or something better. There's other companies that do, other things that is different from that. And I actually applied I saw they had an opening there and it was for an assistant. Now at this time, I had not been an assistant for probably like 7 or 8 years. Like I felt like my ego was like, I haven't done that in years. I'm not being an assistant again, even though I know I could do it. And I was like, well, maybe it's my foot in the company and I'll start there. And I applied, and subconsciously in my mind, I kind of hesitated. Like I self-sabotaged a little bit because they were like, yeah, like send your information. Like they checked the first box, and then they were like, send more info to schedule. And I waited and I think I found out on Thursday, and then I waited till like Monday to send it. Whereas like if I loved it and it was my passion, I would have sent it the next day to make sure I was in. And I waited, and I recognized, like, I was like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want to be doing this work. This doesn't light me up. back to the intuition and knowing myself authentically, I was like, I think it's a test. Like, it's a company I want to work for, but it's not the role. And in the time that I sort of paused, reaching out to them, they hired quickly. So they had hired someone in that space. I was like, okay, it wasn't meant to be. It was just a test. And then another opportunity came through to send like a spec script for a practical magic show that was going to come out, a scripted version of it, on, I think, Showtime. And I actually haven't seen it, so I hope they did it because it sounded really awesome. So I was writing that script, and it was like the most dedicated I had been to like a new project in so long. And I was like, wow, okay, I feel like this is like really mine. I feel like tapped in. I feel like I can do this. And the same week that I was submitting that, the job opened for the podcast production role at TBM. And I was like, what? This is exactly, and it was to run the media department as well. So like overseeing all the video content. I was like, this is my skill set. This is crazy. So that was one of those instances where, because I was in process of, okay, this or something better, that or something better, like trusting my gut, not taking the assistant role, knowing that, okay, if I don't have that, I can submit for this thing. And now I have two things going on. Like, I felt very magnetic. When I applied for the production role, it was like within 24 hours, they offered me the role. So that came through so quickly. And I was like, okay, this is it. And it had all of the elements of, this is the spot I'm supposed to be. Like, it just had that feeling of, okay, yep, it was all leading towards here. So long-winded story, but
That's so amazing. One, that your intuition was pushing you to start your own podcast in the meantime, while you're trying to find what to do, how to get back to that security that you're really wanting at your core. And what's the point, kind of thing. But we don't really know what is divinely conspiring in our favor. We can only listen and follow that compass. And I talk about intuition as the compass. It's that voice that's guiding you to your highest self on your most authentic path. And you just have to trust. You have to trust that that intuition, that compass, is always in your favor. So I love that. Also, at the end, it was so smooth. Everything happened so fluidly. It came through really easily. You did pass that test of like, actually, I want to work for you, but I don't want to work in this position. And once that position came through of the podcast host, it was 24 hours, you said? I mean, that's like an amazing turnaround. So we just have to remember that it doesn't have to be a struggle. Life is supposed to be full of ease. Yes, there is the yin and yang. Recently, I got some difficult health news. I have PCOS, and then they found a mass on my ovary, and I was really struggling. I kind of went into this spiral place. The next day, somebody broke in my car and stole my wallet and charged like $1,500 to my cards. So I was sharing this with my community, and somebody said, like, well, if you're talking about manifestation, like, how can you be manifesting and all this bad stuff is happening to you? And it's like, well, it's not about that. When you're manifesting, everything is great and butterflies and sugar. Life is going to happen. It's how we respond to life. And through the To Be Magnetic process, I mean, everyone listening by now, if you haven't gone to the website at least to check it out, like, here's your super invitation. But I have done so much processing and unblocking and become so magnetic that I'm able to receive those things, allow myself to like be sad that I'm scared and I have PCOS, and also do research and find out that like a lot of women have PCOS, and how can we support and move forward? How can I support myself and move forward? Then the intuition piece comes up, and that led me to the beach. And randomly I met this woman and her baby who just like ran up to me in the sand. And you never know where it's going to lead. And the more that you listen to that, the more you trust those voices, the more magic can happen. And yeah, I can't stress that enough.
Well, first, I just want to say I'm so sorry that you had that happen, both health and a break in. That's really scary, and that's got to be pretty destabilizing news, especially on the health front too. So just holding space for you there.
Thank you.
And to the note about the person who said, "How could you be manifesting and have bad things happen?" One thing this is how I sort of contextualize it in my mind is like, we are meant to pull back the layers, become our whole worthy, authentic self, realize that we can have anything we desire that's authentic to us, and be in flow with the universe, have ease, joy, all of these things. We also are human beings taking on a human form. And in this, maybe this is a bit more spiritual, but, in that sort of realm of humanness, unfortunately, shitty things happen, for lack of a better word. Things happen that are out of our control, that really don't have anything to do with our self-worth at that moment or whatever. They're more lessons on the journey. And I think the whole power behind looking at a situation like that through a manifestation lens is, okay, this bad thing happened. How can I use the tools that I have to A, support me emotionally through this difficult piece? And then B, look for the things that can give me lessons and teachings on the other side of this thing. How can I take my power back instead of falling into sort of like victim mindset and everything bad happens to me? How can I reframe this in order to know that I'm still the powerful, authentic being that I know that I am, and you can be manifesting while also receiving bad news and have bad things happen. I think there was an episode where Lacy was like, yeah, you can be depressed and manifest. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So it's all part of the journey of life. It's just manifestation is a way that you can look at the world through empowering yourself instead of limiting.
Right. And I'm being reminded of even this process of finding out this news. I was most recently working as a private celebrity chef in LA, and I was let go randomly right at the turn of the new year. And I went from making good money to now like, oh my God, what am I going to do? 2 days later, I had a ruptured ovarian cyst and had to go to the emergency room. Ruptured ovarian cysts are more painful than pregnancy or giving birth. It's like insane. And because I had just been, it wasn't as harsh as being fired, but because I was just fired, quote unquote, I was able to get emergency Medi-Cal, which covered all of the expenses of that emergency room visit, including the ambulance ride, which alone is $1,000 at least.
Wow.
So from there, healthcare system, it's not perfect. Hopefully we can work on it. It took about 3 months from that time to now. And I kept trying to call and talk to different, set up established care with my primary and get this referral and waiting. And it was very frustrating because I knew that the ER had tentatively diagnosed me with PCOS, and I didn't know what's the best plan for me if I can't actually see a doctor for another 3 months. One day, I am driving home from the infrared sauna and I get this ping, this intuitive prompt to take action, to just go to my doctor's office instead of calling and waiting on hold. And they had just had a cancellation and got me in immediately to have an ultrasound done. And that ultrasound is where they then found the mass. And so if we go back to that, it's always in your favor that I got fired, but then because of that, I got the support. And I didn't know that there was this deeper issue brewing. And then I listened to that intuition, got an immediate appointment where they found this mass. So it's all conspiring to say like, Tess, you really need to get this checked out. And while it's hard and heavy, I just have total faith that I'm going to be okay, no matter what happens, what the outcome is.
Mm. That's such a good just example of the power of your intuition, of really leaning in those. And it's interesting. How does your intuition come through to you? Because I feel like people think it's this screaming voice that's like, go here now. And it's just like a whisper of your own voice in your head. It's like, what if you did this? Well, you should probably do that. It's just so light, but then the results can be so powerful, as your story shows.
Mine is definitely similar. It's that quiet. I kind of get it in it's like gut solar plexus area.
Mhm.
And I have the gift of claircognizance. And so I get a lot of just knowing.
Mhm.
And the more that I've worked with it, the more authentic I become. And the more I practice my intuition, the easier it is.
Mm.
So when I heard that, one, it's never starting with an I statement. It's not in the past, it's
Mm.
not in the future, and it's never rooted in fear.
Yes.
So it could come in the third person, or it could come just as a statement of go to the doctor.
Mm.
There's not a go to the doctor because I think there's something wrong and you really need to get this checked out. That to me is the compulsion of the ego.
Mhm.
And when we can, the more we are off our authentic path, the harder it is, in my opinion, to receive your intuition. It's always there. It's always trying to communicate with you. It's like an ever-present, loving, patient entity. Think of your angels almost.
Mhm.
And they're going to wait until you are able to receive it. Unless you get so far off your path, then they pull the rug out from under you. And that's the rock
Mm.
bottom. And then when that whispering intuitive voice becomes that scream that I think many of us know can happen, where everything starts to fall apart, that's like really trying to drag you back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like you are so far off. You are not listening. We've tried whispering, we tried guiding, and you are just not listening to your inner self. Um, it's so interesting the times when we listen and we're like, oh, whatever, I don't have to do that. And then seeing such powerful results on the other side, or you continue to build the trust muscle with yourself and with that guidance. Cause you're like, dang, I'm always on point when I know it's from this piece, this knowing.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, so TBM just came out or is coming out with a new aspect of the missing piece, which
Mm-hmm.
is identifying your manifestation pattern. And it was so amazing, the timing of it, even because I had just unlocked my own manifestation pattern and the missing piece to how to magnetize and amplify my manifestations. And then you launched the course, and then we met at that event.
Yeah.
I'm curious what if you've identified yours, what yours
Mm.
is.
So when I went through the workshop, one of the things that I'm calling in is like my dream wedding. And Daniel and I sat down, it's my fiance, Daniel and I sat down and got really clear on what we wanted to feel, what felt authentic to us, like all of the elements of it, even if they were like non-traditional, or even if they like didn't, live up to what someone else's expectations of what this would look like how do we not be codependent in this process and really honor what we want out of it. And the next sort of step in that process is locking in a venue. So we've looked at a number of venues and we've gotten really close. Like some of them like check almost all the boxes, but like the feeling wasn't right. There was just something about, and it's funny because like Daniel felt it first. And then he's like, that didn't feel like that ceremony spot, like was right next to this pool. Like I want it to feel like this safe sort of like bubble around us when we're in the ceremony. Like that's a really important piece to me. I don't want to feel like a whole hotel is staring down at us. And I was like, you're right. And then we went and stood out there and we're like, yeah, like this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like home. And both when I got the TBM job and even when I like manifested the apartment we live in now, it was this feeling of just like a puzzle piece clicking. Like it was like, oh gosh, this feels so good to my soul. Like this feels right. And we haven't had that yet. And so I'm like, what is blocking it? Because I know, like, okay, it's not finances, because I feel like secure and abundant in that. It's I feel expanded. I know a lot of friends that have gone to weddings and beautiful places. I have like a million mood boards of locations that they're at. um Tests, I feel like I'm passing, knowing what's a no, knowing what's a yes. I was like, it's got to be something in the unblocking piece. And so when I went through the workshop, the biggest thing that came up for me was, where am I not honoring my own needs fully? And once I can do that, then this location will present with ease. So for me, I come from like very codependent, a master relationship with family members and caring for their emotions before myself. Um, and then even with friends or work or whatever, I've like have a pattern of like, I can tell what you want from this, and I'll prioritize what you want over what I want. And I don't have to listen to what I want. And as I block and go through this work, I'm clearing it. I'm like, okay, no, I know what I want, and I know how to go about that in a way that's not harmful or bad to anyone else, but is in like a really authentic way. And this whole process, whether it's talking to wedding planners or people that want to help, or people that are making suggestions, or people that are saying we should do X, Y, and Z, I feel like part of me was still sort of like, yeah, maybe we should do that. Like, I don't really care about that piece. And I need to really drop all of that and allow basically reprogramming through the to be magnetic work, which we have, for anyone that doesn't know, we have a guided hypnosis meditation called a deep imagining. And you can go in there, and there's ones for different themes, but one of them, you can reparent your inner child. And so I need to go back into that inner child and say, hey, I know you know what these other people need and are wanting from you, but it's okay if you disappoint them. You're safe if you disappoint them. And so I've been working on blocking a lot lately, and that has been my main focus. And so much so that we kind of even like pause looking at venues until I feel rooted in that unblocking. And then TBD, but I'm sure once we take the leap back into it again, it'll come through with ease.
Absolutely, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's okay to disappoint them. I love watching the show This Is Us. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a scene that was, so Lacy often talks about this, how when you're watching TV, movies, you're in a subconscious state.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're very impressionable. And so pay attention to what you're watching. Also, that can be like kind of if you're absorbing things that are not in alignment with you or feeding this other thing. But
Yeah.
for me, This Is Us is just, it's so healing in so many different ways. And there was a particular episode where Beth was finally working as a dance mentor.
Mm.
And she had to overcome her own limiting beliefs and obstacles to get there. And she had her first student where she was the mentor at this big academy and was helping this student with her training and for the big opening night. And the young girl starts, and within like 10 seconds, she did something wrong and crashed to the ground. And the girl was so mortified that she had been doing all that work and just embarrassed herself in front of hundreds of people. And Beth went out onto the stage and laid on the stage with her and said, "You cannot disappoint me. I will sit here with you for as long as you need until you can stand back up again, or until everyone has gotten bored and they go home. But you cannot disappoint me."
Wow.
And I like rewound and rewatched that scene a few times to
Mm,
more deeply ingrain it in my subconscious, because
mm,
I had a similar thing of that people pleasing and being susceptible to other people's perceptions or their projections, or just I have that open crown center in human design. So aligning with what is really authentic for me can sometimes be difficult if I'm feeling vulnerable. And
mm,
I cannot ever disappoint myself.
mm,
I can never disappoint my angels. I can never disappoint the divine power of the universe.
mm,
And remembering that and just making that almost like a decision. It just is now.
mm.
There's nothing that I can do to disappoint me.
Oh,
It's really cool.
look at that reparenting work. So good.
So good. Yeah, the missing piece is super interesting because through all the journaling that TBM suggests, which is super helpful, I was able to identify that my pattern is really passive.
Mm,
I cannot really take action. I have to just to become clear in myself what it is that I want authentically, and then wait for it to show up.
mm,
So an example would be I want to, before, let's say last year, I want to be a private chef. If I were to go on and apply and submit an application, that would lead me to a test.
mm,
Whereas word of mouth or just a random referral, and then all of a sudden I get an email or a phone call or a DM saying, "Hi, I heard of you from so and so. Are you available for X, Y, and Z?"
mm,
That was always how the manifestation came through. And so a recent example was I am now embarking as an intuition and authenticity mentor. And my mom, whom I love and she's brilliant, she was like, "You're spending too much time on Instagram." And it's like, it's not a real place. It's
mm,
amazing. It's a cool tool, but it's not real. And from your history, you're really good at teaching workshops. So why don't you like go out and go to different wellness spas or go to a yoga studio and offer your services? For me, knowing my manifestation pattern, that wouldn't work. But I love that idea of being out in the world teaching workshops. So
mhm,
yesterday I am out, I'm doing some errands, and I get this ping to go to Erewhon, specifically the one in Santa Monica. And I get in my car, and in California, pedestrians have the right of way always. Every single block on the way to Erewhon, there was a pedestrian. So I drive one block and have to stop and watch this person slowly cross. And then the next, and that has never happened to this degree. So I was starting to get like annoyed, like, come on, what is going on, people? Like, just let me drive. And I get to Erewhon and I get free valet parking, which was super cool. And I felt really fancy. I go in and I wanted to get some sushi, and I go to the sushi case, and there's a mom and her daughter picking out sushi, taking so long. The mom is letting the daughter pick her own sushi. The daughter's like 4, and so she's picking up one and like looking at her mom and then putting it back, and they're blocking the entire case. And the mom knows that people are waiting. There's multiples of us. I'm in that already like impatient mode, but I realized it thanks to my observer mindset. I took a breath and I just like relaxed against the case behind me. This guy comes up and same situation. He can't get sushi either. So we start chatting, and he asked me how my day was, anything magical happened. I was like, "Oh, I was a guest on a podcast this morning, and then I just got free valet. So that was cool." "Oh, what were you a guest for? What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm an intuition and authenticity mentor." And he said, "Well, I own a brain spa. You should come over and talk about offering your services." And I was like, "A brain spa?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're all about neuroscience. And so we have all of these different like virtual reality meditation. We have like different things that you can hook up to your mind while you're doing like a sound bath or something and see how your brain is responding to it. And I was just like, that is everything that I'm all about. And
Wow.
that's great. So the universe, one, gave me that intuitive ping to go to Erewhon, then was putting all of these obstacles to slow me down so that my timing could be perfectly aligned with this guy coming to get sushi.
Mm-hmm.
And I was clear that, oh yes, I do want to be out in the world teaching workshops. And he just came in out of nowhere. And that is my amazing manifestation process.
And the one other thing I would add in there too is like that moment of pause and reset was game changer.
True.
Really subtle, but you saying, okay, let me just surrender to this moment and what's happening. I'm not going to push it. I'm not going to kick the kid over to the side. How can I see what this moment is giving me? And boom, it came through.
Amen. That is so true. And I didn't even pick up on that. So thank you.
Yeah.
That is big, because we can get so lost in our day and sometimes miss our own manifestations if we're not able to receive.
Mm-hmm. Receiving's hard. Receiving's hard for a lot of people, especially, if you feel like you've needed to be in control to be safe, if you feel like you need to, like for your patterning, if you felt like, no, I can't not take action, I have to apply. That's the right thing to do. That's what you're supposed to do. It's like, that's programming. Like, is that authentic to you? Have you seen other people have success in different ways, in different abilities? It's funny, my fiance is the same way. Like when he was moving between jobs recently, I was like, you should just have a goal of like submitting to like 5 LinkedIn things a week. And he's like, it's not for me. Like I know that is a way people get jobs, but like that is not my pattern. Like that's not authentic to me. Like I would not yield the type of job I want if I had to apply via LinkedIn. Nothing against LinkedIn, totally works for some people. But I just think that's really interesting. And his knowing, like, he's like, my thing's word of mouth. Like my fastest route to getting a new job is meeting with people, talking with friends, asking around, seeing what they're doing, seeing if we can work together on something. And that's exactly how we got his job. So you have to listen to your own pattern and know what's right for you.
Go Daniel.
Yeah.
That's awesome that he knows.
He
That's so
knows.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar LinkedIn thing, but it was an intuitive ping that brought me to LinkedIn.
See, that's
and
good.
I applied and it went through this whole thing. I got the job. It turned out to be a test. And so this was when I was like, just before realizing my pattern, that just to receive. But I think that your intuition can still lead you to a test, because it's something that you need to prove. You need to choose yourself. You need to be able to identify, work through the limiting beliefs, pass that test in order to then receive the manifestation. And 3 weeks later, out of nowhere, I got a referral and landed that job with my client. So that brings me to an idea that I have had recently, and it is that I believe that every manifestation will eventually become a test, because we are always changing. We're always up leveling and surpassing that glass ceiling. So what once worked for us will eventually, we have to decide at some point, is this still in alignment with where I'm going? And then passing that test, and whether it's a job that you've been at for a long time and then now all of a sudden it's not right for you, passing the test to leave versus staying.
I really like the way you put that. One of our TBM coaches, Heather, talks about this a lot. Like, a lot of people in the community are calling in their dream partner, their person, the one, or their dream job. It's like, it's your dream right now. It's your person right now, but we always have to like maintain that mindset of like, we're evolving creatures, like we're always growing, and the story is never over, no matter what age you are. You know, at so many chapters of your life, it can evolve and change and become something new. And I love that idea that every full manifestation can eventually become a test, because, you know, you have to see, am I evolving at the same rate and pace with this thing, or is it no longer in alignment? Yeah, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could talk to you for like hours and hours and hours. I am so appreciative of your time. What would you say? TBM is big on authentic code, which are the
Mhm.
4 main pillars of your authenticity. What are
Yeah.
yours?
So freedom, which it's so funny, like when I talk about it, I'm like, yay, I love talking about this. Because it's a part of you that I feel like each individual resonates with about themselves the most. So like talking about it almost gets you excited about it. So freedom, and freedom to me means flexibility with work schedule, like financial freedom to be able to travel and move, freedom to listen to my intuition. You know, if my intuition says, you know, it's a Tuesday and it's 4 p.m. and I need to stop working and go to the beach, I need to do that, you know, and have the freedom to do that and have the support or team around to do that. I think, yeah, that's such a huge one. Freedom to change my schedule or work from remote spots or wherever it is. The other one's home, and home is both aesthetic home, home within my own body, within my like safe space, like something that feels curated. And uh, I always had this feeling of like wanting to live in a hotel when I was younger. I just love the idea of like how expansive a hotel is and how you can go to different rooms and feel like you're in a whole new like movie set or something. And so I've been slowly curating from my apartment to eventually one day will be my at the moment dream home. um, but this feeling of like expansiveness in different chapters and spaces and a place for all of my favorite things. Um, and then impact. So when I see companies that are like cutting edge, I'm learning about like crypto and everything going on in the NFT market, like this top research behind what's happening in the brain and what we're learning about trauma, and even learning a lot about psychedelics and that sort of treatment, and especially impact of like therapy treatments and how that can help people's healing, like forefront of things is like so my passion and interest. I love reading about it, learning about it, talking about it. I'm an Aquarius North Node, so that's like future thinking. So it like makes sense that that's such a big pillar for me. And the last one is sage, and so not like sage the plant, but sort of like the wise sage. And I see sage as both like the communicator of knowledge, but also tapping into, I'm sure you've read The Women That Run with the Wolves by
I
Clarissa.
haven't read that yet.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
I'll have to add it to the Completely Golden Book Club list.
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible. And it's one of those books I feel like you pick up and you put down and you pick up and you put down. Like you read a chapter on a topic at a season that you need to hear that chapter, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And in the book, she talks about this wildish nature, like the inner wolf in us, the inner like animal instincts that's connected to the planet, that has strong instincts, that knows when things are going to happen, how they're going to happen. They're in a cyclical nature with the moon and the ground and the earth. They're just tapped in. And part of me that is so lit up is about this idea of this wildish woman, this back to our roots and tapping into the history and what's been laid before us. So it's kind of interesting now I'm thinking about it. The impact is like very future and the sage is very like wisdom of the past. Yeah, so those are my 4.
Cool. Do you know, it's not currently running anymore, but it's still in existence. It's called the Rewild Yourself podcast. by Daniel
No.
Vitalis. And he was an instructor at my nutrition school, and I got turned on to him. And he talks all about that rewilding nature. He has on amazing guests. Nadine Artemis is on
Oh,
there.
I love
Kim
her.
Anami is on there. And so it is through the lens of a man, a very like burly hunting man, but he does bring in that wild woman essence often.
Ooh.
And I've listened to that podcast over probably 3 times because I love it so much.
Wow. I'll have to listen to it. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. My authentic code right now is truth, which
Mm,
is really in alignment with intuition and just knowing and trusting that voice is my personal truth.
mm,
Beauty, which for a little, I love luxury. And for a little while, I thought maybe it was luxury. And I also love design and creativity. I went to art school. Um, but they all come back to beauty.
mm,
Generosity,
mm,
that is newer, I would say, in the last few months. I picked up on generosity and just how much I love to give and share. And this podcast is one of that, but also like sending a friend a gift for no reason or buying somebody's lunch because I feel like it.
mhm,
And most recently is leadership,
mm,
which I know, at least for me right now, is like a step below being seen.
mm.
And I just started the next level workshop in TBM, which I'm like so excited about because I've been doing the work for 2 years, and I would go in and listen to the welcome thing and be like, oh, I'm not ready yet. Lacy says I have to go back. And now I'm finally to the point where like I can do it.
Yeah.
And that is being seen is like the overarching thing and something I think I will up level to eventually. But the first step of that is stepping into leadership because I've always been more comfortable just as like a cheerleader or maybe like an inspiration, but not an expert or a leader. And so
Mm,
while that eventually feels authentic to me, I think I'm trying it on for size right now
mhm.
and expanding myself into that.
I think that's one cool thing about the authentic code is like it's the parts of you that light you up the most, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you embody all of them right now. Like there are moments where I'm like, I am so in my freedom. I feel it. Like I feel free with my day. And there are other times where I'm like, I'm not tapping into that at all. Okay, that's why I feel so off. Um, and so there are pieces that you can grow towards. They're pillars to remind yourself, no, this is what feels good to me. I need to be moving towards these pillars and this piece.
Beautiful.
Mm.
You are beautiful. This
Oh,
conversation is beautiful. Thank you so
yes.
much.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah. How can people connect with you?
Um, Instagram, definitely at Jessica Ashley Gill. And then on the expanded podcast, where all podcasts are, iTunes, Spotify. Definitely check out the To Be Magnetic Instagram, where we share more on manifestations, your authentic code, deservingness, tips on tests, and all of that fun stuff. Yeah. And then if you feel so called, then check out, I would definitely recommend the Pathway, which is like the all-encompassing membership for the To Be Magnetic work that's channeled through Lacy and is now grown into such a big brand. And it's so exciting to see. So yeah, connect there.
Amazing. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Bye.